Hey, you missed a spot, janitor. A half-eaten protein bar flew through the air, hitting her mop bucket with a splat. The hangar echoed with laughter. Rows of Air Force cadets doubled over, one even pulling out his phone to film. She didn't respond, just bent down, picked up the wrapper, and kept mopping near the fighter jet's landing gear. No one knew her name. She was just the cleaner. Khaki coveralls, frizzy tied-back hair, worn sneakers, invisible to everyone, except the jet she cleaned like it was sacred. This story of injustice and eventual redemption deserves to be shared. So, hit that like button and subscribe to follow more true stories of courage in the face of discrimination. Now, let's rewind to see how this explosive situation began. It wasn't just the mop water on her boots. It was the way they stepped around her like she carried a disease. Every morning at Falcon Ridge Base, Dana Hall pushed her cleaning cart through Hangar 4 in silence. The floor gleamed after her shift, but the looks she got never softened. "She's still here," a cadet muttered as she passed. "Didn't she retire with the dinosaurs?" Someone else snorted. "Maybe she's working off a court-martial." They thought she couldn't hear. But she did. She always did. Zach Reynolds made sure to keep the spotlight on himself, and the insults flowing. He was the golden boy. Third-generation pilot. Charismatic, loud, and dangerous in the way only the overconfident can be. One afternoon, during aircraft prep drills, Dana was wiping down the landing gear of an F-16 when Zach walked by with two other cadets. He stopped, looked her over, grinned. "Careful with that rag, ma'am. You might trigger the ejection seat. Then we'd have to clean you off the roof." The cadets burst into laughter. Dana didn't look up, just kept wiping. Later that day, someone taped a note to her locker in the custodial wing. "Maybe cleaning jets makes you feel like a pilot." It doesn't. It was scrawled in thick marker. Signed, Z. Ray. The base's rumor mill spun harder than ever. Some said she'd washed out of the academy decades ago. Others claimed she was a failed mechanic who got demoted to janitorial duty after an incident. One theory said she was just some loner who liked being around jets. No one knew, and no one asked. During a training briefing, Dana stepped in to clean the whiteboards after the cadets left. One sheet was still up, Zach's flight path analysis. She paused, then picked up a dry erase marker and corrected 3 key trajectory points. Didn't sign her name, didn't leave a note. She just erased error and left accuracy behind. The next morning, Zach stormed into the hangar. "Who touched my board?" he snapped, waving a photo of the revised diagram. No one answered, but everyone looked toward Dana. She was on her knees, scrubbing grease off the floor near the nose wheel. He marched toward her. "You think you're smarter than me, huh?" She stood up slowly, looked him in the eyes, and said nothing. Later that week, a rookie cadet, young, clumsy, barely out of high school, tripped over a cable and nearly slammed into the nose of an aircraft. Dana caught him mid-fall, pulled him back, and repositioned the support stand before it could collapse. The flight officer barely glanced at her, just nodded. "Thanks, cleaner." She gave a polite nod in return, then went back to work like nothing happened. But the rookie never forgot. By now, Dana had become a living ghost. Present, quiet, watching. Cadets whispered stories behind her back, never realizing that she walked past fighter jets the way a sculptor walks past her own statues. She touched each panel like she knew where the stress points were. She checked connections like muscle memory. She hummed softly when she worked. The same tune, always the same tune. Until one day, Theo, the young mechanic, finally asked, "Ma'am, have you flown before?" Dana paused, looked him over, then gave the smallest nod, and walked away. That night, she stayed late. The hangar was dark, empty. The F-16 stood alone. Dana climbed the ladder, settled into the cockpit, not to show off, but to feel it again. Her hand hovered over the throttle, her other over the control stick. Eyes closed, breathing slow. She didn't need the systems online. She already knew where everything was. Every switch, every sound, every vibration. She smiled softly, almost sadly, not because she missed the sky, but because she never truly left it. They didn't know it yet, but the woman they laughed at? She was about to become the name they'd never forget. They pushed harder when she didn't push back. Mockery turned into routine. It was their entertainment now. Dana Hall, the hangar ghost, as they liked to call her, kept her head down, always quiet, always precise. One day, someone placed a fake certificate on the breakroom fridge. It read, Dana Hall, honorary custodial pilot, for outstanding excellence in mopping wing surfaces. Laughter exploded down the corridor. No one removed it. Dana saw it the next morning. She paused for just a second, reading every word. Then she opened the fridge, took out her lunch, egg salad in a Tupperware container, and walked away like it meant nothing. But Theo, the young mechanic who'd asked her if she'd flown before, he noticed the way her hands trembled slightly when she thought no one was looking. During a maintenance exercise, Zach Reynolds accidentally knocked over her mop bucket with his boot. Oh no, better call air traffic control. Janitor spill on runway 3, he said, grinning at his groupies. They laughed, again. Dana, knees wet, just sighed and grabbed a towel. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't glare. She didn't even look at Zach. She just cleaned it up and moved on. That silence? It started to bother people more than any comeback ever could. In the hangar's maintenance logs, her name was never listed, but tools were always returned to the exact right slot. Jets she cleaned somehow performed smoother, faster, sharper. Theo started leaving tools half-set, just to see if she'd adjust them. She always did, flawlessly. You're not just a cleaner, he whispered one day, watching her recalibrate a control linkage with nothing but a wrench and instinct. Dana didn't answer. She just handed him the tool he needed, before he even asked for it, and walked away. At night, she sat near the fence outside the runway, old leather-bound notebook in hand, sketching, calculating, flight patterns, emergency descent curves, fuel burn rate in crosswind scenarios. Pages filled with annotations no cleaner should even know existed. Theo saw them once. His eyes widened. You were a pilot. Still, no answer. Only that same soft hum she always carried under her breath. A melody no one could place. But you felt it when she was near. One morning, Zach strutted through the hangar, helmet in hand. He spotted her wiping down the jet's canopy. Be honest, he said loudly. You're not doing this for the paycheck. Are you? You just like pretending you're still part of this world. Dana froze. Not from fear, just long enough to register the cruelty. Then she looked up at him, really looked, and for the first time in weeks, she spoke. I don't pretend. That's all she said, then turned back to her work. The silence that followed? Heavier than any insult he'd thrown. General Maddox, visiting base for an inspection, noticed her walking past the flight line. He stopped mid-conversation, stared. Is that who I think it is? He asked an officer beside him. The officer shrugged. Just a cleaner. The general didn't reply, but his eyes narrowed. He remembered. That night, Theo saw something that would stay with him forever. Dana sat in the pilot seat of an idle F-16. The engines were off. The hangar was quiet. She wasn't touching the controls. She just sat there, eyes closed, breathing steady, like she was home. And in that moment, even without the noise or the sky, she was flying. They thought she was invisible. They thought they knew her. But they never looked beyond the mop, the silence, the coveralls. And what they didn't know was that the woman they mocked had once flown so high, even radar had to catch up. If you're still with me right now, still listening to this story unfold, leave a comment with the number 1 below. Because the sky hasn't opened yet. And what comes next is something they'll never forget. The morning of the Base Skills Expo arrived with typical fanfare. It was the one day a year when cadets demonstrated aircraft procedures, cockpit protocols, and ground maneuvers for visiting officers and media. The runway gleamed. Planes lined up like trophies. Energy was high. Zach Reynolds was in rare form. He stood by his assigned F-16, helmet tucked under one arm, shades on, grinning at the junior cadets as if he already owned the sky. Today's gonna separate the pilots from the janitors, he said, winking toward Dana as she wheeled a mop past the display line. A few chuckled, some looked away, but no one said anything. She didn't respond, didn't even blink. That afternoon, the weather shifted, wind picked up, clouds thickened, visibility dropped slightly. One of the 3 assigned cadets for the demo run called out sick with a stomach bug, leaving a last-minute gap in the carefully choreographed routine. The hangar buzzed. A demo jet sat ready, fueled, cleared, but no one was available to fly it. All instructors were tied up. An awkward conversation unfolded near the control tower between the operations officer and the maintenance lead. "We can't just let it sit there. It ruins the symmetry of the show. We don't have clearance for a replacement." Then a voice cut in. "Steady, quiet, I'll fly it." Everyone turned. Dana stood at the edge of the hangar, calm as ever, her eyes locked on the jet. The officer blinked. "What?" I said. "I'll fly the plane." Someone laughed. "Ma'am, this isn't pressure washing the parking lot." But General Maddox, who had just walked up behind them, narrowed his eyes. "Wait, let her speak." Dana stepped forward, still in coveralls, still wearing scuffed boots, but there was something about the way she walked, like the space cleared for her. "I'm current on the F-16, she said, "logged over 1.600 flight hours, certified in 6 maneuver platforms. I trained half your instructors." The officer scoffed. "You're telling me you're—" General Maddox cut him off, voice now sharp. "She's Captain Dana Hall, Bronze Star, Operation Skyvale. She flew solo recon over hostile airspace when half the squadron turned back. She's not just a cleaner. She's the best damn pilot this base ever had." Silence fell like a hammer. Zach, standing nearby, dropped his helmet. 10 minutes later, the F-16 engines roared to life. Dana climbed into the cockpit with the ease of a woman who never forgot. No hesitation, no showmanship, just total command. The canopy closed. The runway cleared. She taxied, paused at the edge, and then lifted off with surgical precision. What happened next became legend. She cut through the wind like it wasn't there. High G turns, a knife-edge pass at just under 400 knots. Barrel roll, a vertical climb that held steady longer than anyone thought possible, and then she stalled the jet midair. Hovered, kicked the rudder, and snapped it back into controlled descent like it was a dance move. Even the weather gave way for her. Thunderclouds parted like curtains. The crowd stood in stunned silence. Instructors stopped talking. Cadets dropped their phones. And Zach? He sat down, slowly, as if gravity had remembered he existed. Dana ended the routine with a high-speed flyby. Upside down, canopy facing the audience. The reflection of the crowd glinted in the curved glass. And then, just before vanishing behind the tree line, she dipped her wing. A salute, not to show off, but to close the chapter. When she landed, no one clapped at first. They just watched, eyes wide, mouths open, as if trying to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. The janitor had just performed a routine that only a handful of elite pilots in the country could attempt, let alone complete flawlessly. Theo was the first to speak. She didn't belong on the ground. He whispered, she never did, and in that moment, everyone knew. They didn't speak when she climbed out of the jet. They didn't clap, didn't cheer. They just watched, frozen. Dana removed her helmet with the calm of someone who had nothing left to prove. Not even to herself. She handed it to the ground crew, nodded once, and walked back toward the hangar like she just finished sweeping a floor. No cameras followed her, no parade, but her silence roared louder than any flyby. Zach Reynolds didn't move. He was still sitting on the tarmac, helmet by his feet, jaw slack. The same cadets who once surrounded him like orbiting moons now kept their distance. Nobody said his name. No one needed to. He had mocked a war hero, lied about his own performance in drills she had quietly corrected, called her names she never once returned. Now she had flown a maneuver even his father, a retired brigadier general, had never attempted in combat. And all Zach could think was, she was here the whole time. Watching, listening, enduring. General Maddox addressed the stunned cadets that evening in the ready room. You all asked how to become pilots. He said, you looked for medals, bravado, flight hours on paper, but the best pilot on this base wore a mop bucket on her hip and never asked for your approval. He paused. You saw her every day. And you ignored her. The silence that followed was suffocating. Theo stood outside later that night, hands in his pockets, watching the sky. He'd always admired the quiet ones. But now he felt something deeper, regret. He remembered the way she'd fixed the linkage without being asked. How she hummed while cleaning panels like they were instruments. How she looked at the jet, not like a machine, but like an old friend. He remembered asking her, "Did you fly?" She hadn't answered, but now he understood. She never stopped. In the dorms, one cadet took down the fake certificate from the fridge. The one that mocked her. He crumpled it quietly, tossed it in the trash. Another cadet, one of Zach's groupies, walked away from his bunk that night without a word. Packed his duffel, and transferred out of the program the next morning. "I didn't come here to be part of this," he said simply. The chain reaction had started. Captain Holt, who had brushed Dana aside during previous evaluations, requested a private meeting with General Maddox. "She never told us," Holt said, almost defensively. "She didn't need to," Maddox replied. "The jet knew. That's all that ever mattered." Zach didn't show up for morning drills. His bunk was made, his locker empty. A formal withdrawal was submitted on his behalf that afternoon, citing personal reasons. No one stopped him. No one said goodbye. Meanwhile, Dana returned to the maintenance hangar. No announcement, no orders. She walked in, tied her coveralls, and grabbed the mop. Just like always. When Theo approached her, unsure what to say, she handed him a checklist. "You missed a loose bolt on the stabilizer. Page 3. His mouth opened, closed. He finally managed. "You're really not going to say anything?" Dana looked at him, then smiled. "Just a little. Already did." That night, someone placed a new nameplate above her locker. No fanfare, no signature. Just 4 words, cleanly stenciled in black. Captain Dana Hall, still flying. From that day on, the cadets didn't avoid her. They nodded. They stepped aside. They watched when she worked, really watched. Some even asked questions, quietly, humbly, the way a student should ask a teacher. Dana didn't seek their apology. She didn't need it, because in the end, the people who matter never measure greatness by noise. They measure it by how you rise, when no one thinks you can. A week passed. Dana returned to her daily routine like nothing had happened. She still arrived at sunrise. Still cleaned every cockpit like it was a cathedral. Still hummed the same quiet tune under her breath. But the base had changed. Cadets nodded when she walked by. Officers stepped aside. Even the hangar chief, who once called her non-essential support staff, started handing her reports directly. His voice lower, his tone measured. It wasn't fear. It was respect, earned the hard way. One morning, an official memo arrived from command headquarters. To Captain Dana Hall. Subject: full reinstatement recommendation approved. Offer: return to active flight duty with immediate effect. Rank confirmed. Dana read it once, then folded the letter in half and tucked it into her back pocket. She didn't mention it to anyone. She didn't pack her bags. She just finished cleaning the F-18 canopy and moved on to the maintenance room like it was any other Tuesday. But some noticed. Theo, now shadowing her full-time, finally worked up the courage to ask, "So, are you going back?" Dana didn't look up from the checklist. No. He blinked. But, why? She paused, then looked out across the airfield, where 3 cadets were struggling to adjust a rudder mechanism. "They don't need me in the air," she said quietly. "They need me here, to teach them how to walk before they try to fly." Later that week, Dana placed her badge and ID card on the chief officer's desk without a word. A sealed envelope sat on top. No signature, just a short message inside. "This place is in good hands now. Teach them to listen better than they speak." Word spread fast. No one made a public announcement. There were no salutes, no send-off. But when Dana crossed the runway that final morning with her bag over one shoulder and her boots echoing across the concrete, the entire flight line went still. Instructors paused mid-briefing. Cadets turned and stood. One even removed his cap, on his own. She passed through the center of them like a quiet storm that had already changed everything it touched. No medals, no handshakes, no last words, just dignity. General Maddox watched from a distance. He turned to Captain Holt and said, "She could have had anything she wanted. And she asked for nothing." Holt replied, "She didn't need to. She left with more than any of us." Back in the maintenance bay, Theo found her old flight manual tucked into a drawer. Inside was a note. handwritten and taped to the first page. To the one who chooses silence over pride, skill over spotlight, and grace over ego. You're ready. No name. But everyone knew who wrote it. 2 weeks later, a cadet tried to brag about topping a flight simulation. Brooks, the same cadet who once stood silent during Dana's humiliation, spoke up. "Before you brag," she said firmly, "ask yourself what Dana Hall would say." The room went quiet. She didn't have to say more. A new phrase started appearing around base, scribbled in notebooks and carved lightly into locker doors. Fly like Dana. It wasn't about skill. It was about presence, discipline, integrity, and walking away, when walking away meant everything. Hundreds would come and go through that base in the years to follow. They would hear the story. Some would dismiss it as a myth. Others would lean in, study her flight logs, her handwritten corrections in the archives, the perfectly maintained jets she left behind. But one thing always stayed the same. Every new cadet would eventually ask, "Who was Dana Hall?" And someone, usually someone who had once laughed, would reply softly, "She was the best we ever had. And you'll never forget her, even if she made sure you didn't know her name." Years later, a young cadet stood in front of the jet Dana once flew. He'd heard the stories, the silence, the flight, the walkaway. He turned to his instructor and asked, "Why didn't she stay?" The instructor looked out toward the empty runway and said, "Because real strength doesn't need applause. Dana didn't fly to be seen. She flew because it was right. And then she stepped aside, so others could rise." That's the kind of greatness that echoes long after the noise fades. And maybe that's the lesson we're all meant to carry. You don't need recognition to make an impact. You need courage to stay steady when the world doubts you. And grace to leave when you've proven enough. So if her story moved you, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or silenced, leave a comment with the word, "Still here." Because sometimes the strongest voices are the ones who speak last, or never at all, and those are the ones we remember forever.